Welcome back to Mid-American Money. We're coming from the beautiful Hilton Hotel in beautiful downtown Omaha, Nebraska, across the street from the Quest Center where the annual Berkshire Hathaway meetings are going on. And this is a center of activity. And Tony, first off, we could talk about this volatility. The market volatility is just remarkable, but now the volatility has actually come down in equity markets and increased in the bond markets. Now, what this is telling me, at least I'm thinking inflation. In other words, the market saying a lot of inflation, little inflation. And of course, inflation is not so bad for the equity markets, it's certainly bad for the bond markets. So, I mean, this is certainly volatility creates opportunities, but it also creates a heck of a lot of losses. Are you getting scared?
I think the bond traders are looking ahead. Of course, bonds typically run out farther, and I think they're planning that inflation is going to come, and I think that's why you're seeing this problem in the bond market.
Yeah, and of course, this, as you said previously, this uncertainty, and that's really what we're seeing, the uncertainty surrounding what the government is going to do or not going to do, get in, get out. Of course, got into Chrysler this week, going to be a stockholder there. And this week, of course, the president's budget plan is passed by Congress. But now in Missouri, our neighbor, this past week, President Obama talked about raising the tax, taking the cap off taxable Social Security wages. Tony, tell us what this will do to a small business owner that's in that bracket there of $100,000 to $250,000 or $300,000. What's it going to do?
I think it's going to be unbelievably detrimental to those people. I think it's certainly going to be detrimental to firms that would have a number of employees who are paid above the cap.
In that bracket.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in pharmaceutical industry and you have a number of researchers and you pay people that over that cap amount, which is a little over $100,000.
So just to let the folks know, right now the cap above the cap, $102,000 approximately.
Right.
There's no Social Security taxes. Now there is a Medicare portion as well.
And then as an employee, you won't have to pay it, and as an employer, you don't have to pay that.
But now you're going to under this. And what it means is in certain states, your taxes as a business owner are going to go up to 60 cents on the dollar, including the state portion. That is confiscation. That's not taxation, that's confiscation.
Absolutely. That's going to be huge for some of them.
And I think it would be very bad for the U.S. economy. I expect us to be moving out of this recession at the end of this year. Well, if that's passed, if that comes through, we're going to be moving back in. It's going to be a W, not a V recovery. In other words, up and then back down.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing, Ernie, is as long as that hangs out there, the uncertainty of that slows down the marketplace. It causes this lack of confidence because people aren't sure, should I spend that money or will I need it to pay those taxes next year?
Now, speaking of what's the hurdle? I mean, let's revisit that again. The biggest hurdle that the U.S. economy faces right now, as you're seeing it.
Right now, I think it's restoring confidence
across
the board.
Just simple leadership, restoring confidence, having a little certainty there in the market.
Right.
Let's see that.
And ultimately, I think that's going to give way to the biggest challenge more over, let's say, 5 years is going to be fiscal integrity. I think there's a number of people on both sides of the aisle that are looking at this and going, I'm not sure we can sustain this level of borrowing. I'm not sure the people we're borrowing funds from are going to continue to lend us money.
And then we're talking about over the course of 10 years, $9 to $10 trillion according to the Congressional Budget Office. That's against an economy that's about $14 trillion. Too much money. And of course, that's going to push interest rates up higher.
Absolutely.
Going to push our taxes, our inflation,
Yes.
or a combination of all three of them. Of course, those are the enemies of investors globally.
Absolutely.
So we agree that we need some certainty. But I think the housing market, we need to underpin the housing market. What we're doing is tapping around to like the banks. The big boys and girls in New York and Washington, the swinging door, Goldman Sachs to Washington, back to Goldman Sachs. That's reprehensible, what we're seeing. The real problem is in housing. Let's see a housing solution. The $8,000 credit for first-time home buyers is pathetic. We need to see a bigger one. We need to see it for everybody. I'd like to see some action in the housing market. That's where I'd like to see some action.
I think that's good. I think we need to recognize that what we did earlier was create unsustainable demand. People who really shouldn't have been buying homes because they weren't good credit risk bought homes. And so we built our housing inventories assuming that many more people was really credit worthy and would actually be able to purchase houses. That excess inventory has to be filtered out of the market before we're ever going to get the fundamentals of the marketplace back.
So you would take a more free market approach to let those inventories be sold off.
I don't see how else we're going to get around it. There's no way you can just add money to the market. You and I don't need 6 houses if we're credit worthy just to be able to buy up that excess inventory. A person doesn't need that many homes.
Okay, well, but I would like to see some action there. In other words, there is a potential for a bubble, if we're recreating the bubble we just got out of. But anybody who thinks we're not entering bubble territory right now is not paying attention. We're going to have a bubble. The question is, where is it going to be, and who's going to lose the big time money?
Right.
I mean, right now, there's a potential bubble in not biofuels, but alternative energy production. You've actually encouraged getting into that industry, Tony.
Well, in alternative industry, I think that there's, as a general area,
but in certain segments, there could be some real bubbles.
In segments, I'm concerned about ethanol. I'm not sure that there's a fundamentals there, and you see some softness in that market and a lot of uncertainty. Again, because we're not sure what direction that uncertainty is leading to lack of confidence on investors and the general public.
Okay, and now turning to a somewhat related issue, of course, what about this H1N1 virus? There's some real potential to hit us again, not just medically, but also health-wise, but also economically.
Absolutely, and you saw earlier this week as that unfolded that the market was a little nervous about that, not necessarily because of the cases that we witnessed, but because of the uncertainty and the potential in the marketplace. That's the underlying thing. The markets love stability, and right now what we have is underlying fundamental instability.
Okay. All right, well, Tony, now you gave us the right headline last month. You said U.S. Auto bankrupt. Okay, well, give us a headline for that this month.
This one's somewhat easy. I think GM's going to go bankrupt.
Wow, okay, you think GM is going to bankrupt?
I think it's inevitable.
I think what the headline is going to be is inflation is much higher than what we thought it was, because this week the GDP numbers came in less announced or less visible was the GDP deflator, which is at 2.9%. That's too much inflation given this low level of economy. So I think the headlines is in that area, that inflation rears its ugly head. Okay, what indicators are you going to be watching, Tony?
Unemployment.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned this, that in our local survey, for the 15th time out of 16 periods that we've sseen this drop in employment. I think that's a key aspect that we have to keep looking for.
You know what I'm going to be watching? Two things combined with what you're saying is the first-time claims, which come out every Thursday, watching that number, but also I'm going to be watching the 10-year Treasury. That yield has popped up there by as much as 50 basis points, 0.5%. That's telling us something, folks. That is inflation. Some of that's inflation. So I'm going to be watching that number very closely, and I'm really concerned about that. Now, Fed meets on June the 23rd and 24th. What are they going to do, Tony? Nothing.
Nothing.
What can
they
do?
Still meet?
That's right. Are they meeting there? But they are buying long-term treasuries, and of course, they're trying. They're against a tidal wave, trying to keep yields low on mortgages and long-term treasuries by buying them, and that's very tough. Okay. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us again today for Mid-American Money. I'm Ernie Goss. Today I've been joined by Tony Hendrickson, Dean of the College of Business Administration at Creighton University. We've come here from the beautiful Hilton in downtown Omaha, across the street from the Quest Center. We hope you will join us again when we come back to you in June with our broadcast, with our podcast. Thank you very much.